While compiling this list, I was guided by criteria such as containing additives, empty calories, and low nutritional value of the product, as well as the content of potentially carcinogenic compounds and the source of hidden sugar. Swapping inferior products for superior ones, which I will now suggest to you, will reduce the risk of diabetes, insulin resistance, heart disease, as well as depression or fatty liver disease. The first group of products is coffee drinks. I consider real coffee to be the most health-promoting product possible. However, what I have in mind here is real coffee, not a coffee-like product such as coffee drink. You only need to look into its composition to see that it has little to do with coffee. The first place in the composition of coffee drinks is sugar. Sometimes there is even about 95% of it, and this means that there's only about 5% of real coffee in it. That is, when you buy a coffee drink, you will not get a coffee, but actually a sachet of sugar with coffee mixed in. Leaving aside the issues of the harmful effects of sugar here, the coffee drink seems to be an ideal way to sell us sugar at many times the price. Coffee drink manufacturers are offering us sugar as much as 16 times more expensive. Here, by the way, I will clarify one point that some people confuse. That is, coffee beverage is not the same as instant coffee. As I said, in a coffee drink we have about 95% sugar plus a few percent instant coffee. And instant coffee itself is made up of 100% coffee. That is, when you reach for instant coffee, you actually get coffee and not, for example, sugar or anything else. But in any case, instead of a coffee drink, it is a good idea to choose plain, real coffee. To make sure you don't get confused, it's a good idea to read product labels. As I've already brought up the topic of coffee, I will also say right away that it's better to give up traditional powdered coffee creamers as well. I expect that some people may be surprised by the fact that these types of products usually do not contain cream at all in the composition, and such a slightly milky taste is due solely to the addition of milk proteins. In the first place in the composition of coffee creamers, we most often find glucose syrup, which is de facto pure sugar. Next on the list of ingredients we have hydrogenated or modified vegetable fats such as palm and coconut fat. In the form in which they are used in food production, they are not very functional, that is, they have no health benefits. To make matters worse, such coffee creamers often contain stabilizers in the form of phosphates, emulsifiers, or anti-caking agents. Admittedly, each of these additives is not particularly dangerous to health, but you should be aware that every day we absorb a whole lot of such additives, and this may not be indifferent to our bodies. Instead of artificial coffee creamers, it is better to reach for carrageenan-free creamer, and why carrageenan-free is also something I will mention shortly. In addition, coconut milk, oat or almond milk will work, and if one has no objections to milk, one can also opt for it. Although real cream will be even better than milk, since the proteins in milk can combine with the antioxidants present in coffee and somewhat impede their absorption. Of course, the list could not lack sweetened beverages, including sodas. In my opinion, these are the worst products we have to deal with on a daily basis. They are widely available, tasty, and relatively inexpensive, and thus a lot of people really reach for them. And as scientific studies confirm, regular consumption of such products ruins our health. In one standard serving, that is, in one glass of sweetened drinks, we have as much as 25 grams of sugar, which is as if we sweetened one glass of tea with 5 teaspoons of sugar. I don't think I know any person who would load that much sugar into tea. And with drinking a sweetened beverage containing the same amount of sugar, however, we have no problem. Sweetened beverages are a very tricky product, and this is because in their small volume is concentrated precisely a large amount of sugar. What's more, these products are easy to consume. We don't have to bite or chew them, which makes us willing to absorb larger amounts of sugar in the form of beverages than, for example, sweets. Well, and sweetened beverages do not cause a feeling of satiety as in the case with solid product. In addition, it should be mentioned that carbonated beverages are characterized by high acidity, that is, they have a low pH of 2.5 to 3, which is due to the presence of phosphoric acid or citric acid. This, combined with the high sugar content, makes these products extremely effective in damaging our teeth. By this I mean damage to the enamel, the crumbling of teeth, the development of decay, or the formation of stains. Anyway, scientific studies show outright that people who regularly consume sweetened beverages have a 3 times higher risk of tooth erosion compared to those who avoid them by a wide margin. However, it is worth realizing that the destruction of teeth is nothing with respect to what else sweetened drinks of various kinds can do to our bodies. I don't want to go into detail here, but I will give you figures that will illustrate the scale of the problem. Well, as a result of frequent use of sweetened beverages, the risk of developing fatty liver disease goes up by 40%, coronary heart disease by 35%, hypertension by 12%, type 2 diabetes by 26%, depression by 31%, gout by 35%, chronic kidney disease by 30%, and even cancers including liver, colon, prostate, or breast cancer by up to more than 20%. The bitter icing on the cake is the fact that consumption of sweetened beverages increases mortality. According to a study, almost 200,000 people a year die worldwide from their regular consumption alone. After discussing the next point, 0 drinks with aspartame, I will state what is much healthier to drink when we crave something refreshing, sparkling, and even sweet. I will admit that personally I am not convinced precisely about 0 or light beverages which contain the artificial sweetener aspartame in their composition. It can be hidden on the labels under the number E951. Officially, it is recognized as a health-safe compound with no side effects. However, by delving into the scientific literature and taking the time to review scientific studies or review papers from reputable journals, one may develop some doubts about its safety. For example, I came across information that at the cellular level, aspartame causes oxidative stress and damages the integrity of cell membranes, and this promotes systemic inflammation. Also, some scientists indicate that aspartame may interfere with the 2 most important detoxifying organs, which are the liver and the kidneys. In addition, there are growing indications that aspartame interferes with the functioning of the nervous system and the immune system. And there is another controversial issue, namely, some researchers believe that aspartame shows potential carcinogenic effects, increasing the risk of leukemia and lymphoma, for example. In my opinion, there are too many certain contradictions and doubts about the safety of aspartame consumption, and because of this, drinks sweetened with this sweetener are included in this list. You are probably wondering what to drink then, since sweetened drinks including sodas or even 0 drinks with aspartame are failing off. Well, contrary to appearances, healthy alternatives are indeed plentiful. For example, you can make yourself regular tea and consume it in chilled form. It can also be fermented tea in the form of kombucha, which is ideal in summer as it gives great refreshment. We can also reach for coconut water, vegetable juices, especially beet or tomato juice, juice from sauerkraut or cucumbers, as well as freshly pressed fruit juices. And here I particularly recommend tart cherry juice or cranberry juice, which can be diluted with water. Various fruit and vegetable cocktails prepared from whole vegetables and fruits will also be a good option. Nothing prevents you from reaching for plain water with the addition of lemon juice, mint leaves, cinnamon or ginger, or lemonade based on carbonated mineral water. Now I will move on to another point that probably concerns many people. That is white bread. Well, it is important to know that products prepared on the basis of processed refined wheat flour are literally purged of nutrients and contribute really little good. White bread provides high amounts of carbohydrates and at the same time little fiber. This makes such bread characterized by a high glycemic index, that is, after eating it, there is a significant increase in blood glucose concentration, which is not a favorable phenomenon. In the long term, this promotes dysregulation of carbohydrate metabolism and the development of insulin resistance and even diabetes. Scientific studies prove outright that people who reach for processed grain products, including white bread, have a higher risk of developing diabetes by as much as 32%. In addition, people who reach for light bread are also more likely to be overweight or become obese. For a similar reason, I don't recommend reaching for rice wafers and light vasa bread. Instead of these products, if there are no contraindications, it is best to choose dark bread, of course. By this I mean, for example, wholemeal rye bread on sourdough. Willing or unwilling, smoked fish and sausages also had to be included in this list, but here I immediately emphasize that I am referring mainly to products smoked in the traditional hot way. However, unlike the previously mentioned products, they cannot be called artificial food, which does not change the fact that frequent use of them is associated with certain health risks. Well, you should know that during smoking, the combustion of wood produces certain amounts of toxic compounds, which are called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, abbreviated as PAHs. It is important to know that they migrate into food during smoking. Unfortunately, these are components with carcinogenic effects. Of course, occasional consumption of such products will not be associated with serious health consequences, but you should nevertheless be aware of certain risks if these products were to land on your plates more often. However, if you want to reach for smoked fish more often, I recommend choosing cold smoked products. It would be a mistake if the list lacked a place for cookies, chocolate bars and wafers. It is vain to look for anything of value in such products. Of course, most cookies and wafers contain light wheat flour, which is really a source of readily available carbohydrates, which we have enough of our diets anyway. Bars, on the other hand, even the cereal ones, are very often loaded with pure sugar. It happens that one small bar of 40 grams has about 15 grams of sugar. It's as we enclose 3 teaspoons of sugar in it. As for waffles and cookies still, sometimes partially hydrogenated vegetable fats are present in their composition, which are a source of trans fats. These are modified fats, the supply of which in high quantities entails a number of health consequences. I am referring to the increased risk of arteriosclerosis, stroke or ischemic heart disease. Moreover, trans fats are a cause of premature death from cardiovascular disease. Other negative effects of their consumption also include insulin resistance, the formation of chronic inflammation, liver steatosis, disruption of the composition of the intestinal microbiome, and even carcinogenic effects. In addition, the aforementioned products sometimes deign us a whole range of food additives. We are talking about glucose-fructose syrup, emulsifiers, raising agents, or artificial flavors, among others. Instead, we can introduce, for example, self-baked oatmeal cookies with various health-promoting additives. Taking a moment of pause, I would have a small request. If any of you would like to make your contribution to making our community on this channel grow stronger, just click on the subscribe button which is located below the video, and then the bell that appears next to it. If you find my videos helpful, I think it is worth it because, by the way, thanks to your subscription, you won't miss other valuable videos. Thank you in advance, and let's get back to the topic. I also do not recommend reaching for fruit yogurts. Despite the fact that these products have the word yogurt in their name, it doesn't mean that they are exceptionally healthy. This is because they are often sweetened. I think not all of you are aware that in a small fruit yogurt we usually have about 20 grams of sugar, or 4 teaspoons. The fruit itself, on the other hand, is usually no more than 5 to 10%. They are so processed anyway that they are deprived of most of the valuable compounds for health. In my opinion, a better option is to choose plain natural yogurt and simply add fresh fruit to it. While we are on the subject of dairy products, I will also mention in passing dairy desserts, which are also not a very good choice. Aside from sugar, of which there is also very often a lot in them, they also have a thickening agent in the form of carrageenan, which appears on the label under the number E407. At this stage of the state of knowledge, I would not like to make a clear judgment on whether it is a bad ingredient. Nevertheless, experiments on animals have shown that this additive can negatively affect our intestines by causing damage to the epithelium, increasing inflammation. And it's worth keeping this fact in mind, especially if you are struggling with intestinal problems. For the sake of principle, I will also briefly mention that among the products that are better not to reach for too often are potato chips. Fried potatoes do not herald anything good. Not only that, but in many cases sunflower oil is used for frying, and I think a good portion of you know very well that in terms of health this is one of the worst choices when it comes to just frying. Traditional sunflower oil is in no way suitable for frying because it then produces harmful compounds, including carcinogenic ones. Potato chips are also a source of salt. One large packet of standard potato chips even provides about 4 grams of this ingredient. And here's a reminder that according to official recommendations, we shouldn't provide more than about 5 grams of salt each day. And while we can argue with these recommendations, it nevertheless shows the scale of how much salt we more or less consciously provide with chips. In my opinion, healthy people don't need to be somehow strict about salt and limit it at every possible step. Anyway, I will record a separate episode about it. Nevertheless, too much of it does no one any good. Hence, it is best to follow the principle that you can freely reach for products that are natural sources of salt, while it is worth reducing the consumption of highly processed products, to which salt has not been regretted. Here, by the way, I will also add that in addition to potato chips, it is also good to give up fried nuts for exactly the same reasons I just mentioned. We can successfully replace potato chips and fried nuts with regular nuts, pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, and we can also buy or make our own healthy vegetable chips, such as dried beets, tomatoes, chickpeas, or artichokes. Among the products that are extremely artificial, which is better not to reach for, I also include instant soups. They in turn treat us to, among other things, pressed instant noodles which have rather little in common with ordinary noodles. In addition, you will find flavor enhancers mainly in the form of monosodium glutamate. Researchers have shown that in sensitive people, especially migraine sufferers, this ingredient can trigger headaches. In addition, this compound contributes to the development of overweight and obesity, and that's if only because it inhibits the secretion of the satiety hormone, making us feel full less often. In addition, one serving of instant soup provides about 4 grams of salt, and here again, as with chips, I believe that this is an unnecessary source of salt in our diet. Besides, instant soups very often contain phosphates, providing phosphorus, which most of us consume too much anyway. And you should know that its excess limits the absorption of some valuable minerals and can also cause calcification of organs and tissues. After listening to this material, I would like you not to walk away from the screen with the belief that occasionally opting for the products on this list will be an assault on your health. I believe that everything is for people, even if something is not exactly healthy. In any case, it is useful to know the line between occasionally and often. Of course, everyone should draw it for themselves. However, it won't be a revelation when I say that it's best to throw the products discussed today into the shopping cart as rarely as possible. What's more, everything is getting so expensive, so it's just a shame to throw money away on something that not only isn't nutritious, but can also do harm. And that's all for today's video. Thank you for your attention and see you next time.